Lucy Powell, thank you so much for joining us today on the Prospect podcast. So first of all, why are you running as deputy leader? Why should people vote for you?
Well, I'm running for deputy leader, well, mainly because lots of people asked me to do it in the very sort of short amount of time between it becoming vacant and needing to get sort of nominations. It's been a very, very short campaign because for a lot of the last year, 15 months or so, I've really acted in many ways as a shop steward of the backbenches. And I think they were sort of very keen to have someone like me in this job. So there was a pushing forward, if you like, of me. But I very quickly realised that we needed a contest. We needed to have a debate within the party about whether we could do things better, and whether we were being the best versions of ourselves that we could be, and that I felt I could bring to the table a broader voice representing the kind of broad coalition of our party, that I am someone who's, yes, I'm loyal. I've always loyally kind of served the party, but I am also someone who's not been afraid to speak truth to power or to say when things are going wrong or that we need a course correction. And I'm someone that I think, I'm not factional. I can work across the party, right across our movement. Our movement is our strength, connected to our communities, our workplaces, and so on, and be that bridge on a full-time basis, kind of politically all the time, outside of government. And they were some of the things early on that I felt I could bring to the role, and that's something that I think members are really looking for, actually. So
one of the things that you've sort of picked up on recently, maybe one of the ways in which you would sort of challenge a bit, is on immigration. So you wrote an op-ed in The Guardian where you sort of talked about taking the fight to reform and kind of how the government is currently tackling reform. So what is the government currently doing right and wrong in terms of its messaging around immigration, and what would you do differently?
Yeah, I think obviously this is kind of one of the big issues of our time, isn't it? Kind of how we take on reform. I think the first thing to say is that a lot of party members, a lot of the public want us to stop talking about reform, actually, and want us to start talking about ourselves a little bit more. So what I've talked about is wrestling back the political megaphone to set the terms of the debate ourselves. Yes, immigration is a very important issue of our time, and uncontrolled illegal migration, people not feeling that we've got control of it and it's not a fair and robust system, is a challenge and needs to be solved. But where I disagree fundamentally with reform is the idea that immigration is the root of all the country's problems and the reason why people are in insecure work, can't afford a decent home, can't pay the bills, struggling to get by, one job not being enough. Those reasons that people feel like that are not all caused by immigration. They're caused by an economy that's not working for ordinary people. So I want to kind of wrest back the microphone on some of that, but also call out. I think we've just got to be a lot stronger in calling out reform where they're absolutely wrong.
How do you do that? I mean, the Prime Minister sort of in the last day or so had some slightly stronger language in how he's described reform's approach. Is that kind of a step in the right direction, or?
Yeah, definitely. And I think he picked some of my language from my Guardian article actually this morning. I was quite proud about that, which is good. But look, I think it's also about having a very strong unifying story to tell that unites our voter coalition and unites the country as well. And I think, trying to out-reform or tacking one way and tacking another, that just does not work. We have got to have a clear diagnosis of what's wrong with the country and how we are fixing it and how we're going to fix it, and knit that story together, because let's be honest, we're losing just as many, if not more, votes to our left flank and more support on our left as we are to reform as well. So it's about unifying that. So part of that is about wresting back the megaphone, and part of that is about calling out Farage and his ilk when they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong on the policy on ILR. I mean, rounding up people who are here legally, who are here fairly, who are contributing, and deporting them as though somehow that's going to solve all the problems. It's completely wrong, and we've got to be really strong about that. And the things that are fundamentally wrong with our country and why they're not working, Nigel Farage is not the guy to solve them. I think I said in the Guardian piece, he's the kind of love child of Enoch Powell and Thatcher.
What do you think he's saying that is kind of getting that people are responding to? Like, what is the thing that Farage is saying that is making people think, actually, I'll vote for that guy?
Because I think he is he's very authentic, isn't he? And I think we've not been so authentic ourselves lately. I think he is offering people a clear diagnosis. It's one I fundamentally disagree with, but he has got a diagnosis, which is immigration and uncontrolled immigration is the reason that you are all feeling worse off. And we haven't been able to counter that argument properly. And so I think he's offering sort of easy answers for people in a clear way, and that's sort of attractive. I think also, when you look, people are crying out for change, fundamental change the way this sort of trickle down economy has not been working. The globalization, the model that we've all operated under for the last 30, 40 years has just not been working for people. So people keep voting for change. They voted for Brexit. They voted for Boris. They voted Labour in 2024. They keep voting for change. And they're not experiencing that quickly enough. So that's creating this disillusionment with politics, which then Farage is able to come in and resolve. And I think that's the responsibility that's really massively on our shoulders now as Labour. We're in government. We're also the Labour Party. So we're always the ones who stand up against hate and division, and stand up for proving the model that progressive politics can actually change people's lives. And we have got to prove that model right now. And that's the responsibility on our shoulders.
You talked about kind of Labour maybe lacking an authenticity. What is an authentic Labour for you, and who is Labour kind of really meant to be for today?
Well, look, I think there's some polling out, this weekend, isn't there, which chimes with what I'm saying, is that we haven't given people a really, really clear sense of who we are for and in whose interests we are governing, and that every single thing we do is in service of that. And I think we've got to give a much clearer sense of that we are for rewiring the country, which needs rewiring. We are for tilting the scales in favour of the many and not the few. And I don't think we've done loads of really good things in that regard, whether that's workers' rights bill, which is fundamentally sort of shifting the dial on security and dignity in work, the renters' rights bill, fundamentally shifting the dial from landlords to renters, public ownership of railways and buses around the country, fundamentally shifting the dial, a massive programme of social housing building, fundamentally shifting the dial. I don't think we're knitting all of that together in that compelling story to show whose side we are on and why we're doing all these things. We seem to sort of tack one way and tack the other. And we look tactical. We don't look principled and clear enough. And I think giving a greater sense of that, I think will really help us with that authenticity, because then people are like, okay, they're the people that are trying to help me with this particular problem. And that's not something we've kind of done.
So a few weeks ago, you lost your job.
Yep.
Fired, and you might.
I was sacked. Yeah, I'm owning it. Don't worry, I'm owning it. Yeah.
Be really sensitive about saying it. And in a few weeks, you might be deputy leader of the party. So you're going to meet Keir Starmer for your first chat as deputy. What's that going to be like?
We had a chat actually I'm losing track of the weeks now, when we were in Parliament, sort of after I was on the ballot paper and all of that. We had a really good chat. And I can help. I can really help Keir, and I can help this government right now to better represent that broad view of our movement, which is when we're at our best. And when you look back at Tony Blair's governments, he always had round the cabinet table, until they sort of decided to resign themselves, Robin Cook, Claire Shaw, we always have represented the kind of broad church of the Labour Party, and that's when we're at our best and at our strength. I think I can help re-inject that back into this government and reconnect him back to the PLP, to members and the country. And I will say to him, I'm there to help. But equally, I will have my own mandate as deputy leader. And I think this is, I take this with huge responsibility. but it is incredibly powerful, that I wouldn't be there because it was in the gift of the Prime Minister. I would be there because the members had elected me. And that mandate and that position comes with it huge responsibility, but it also comes with it the ability to say things where they need to be said and to help with that sort of course correction that I think we need to go on.
Do you think you can help from that position? Do you think you can help Keir Starmer? You know, there's a lack of you're saying there's a lack of a kind of story of a diagnose. Can you help him diagnose the problem and tell a better story for the position, do you think?
Yes, I do. And I actually think there's a huge virtue now. Look, this position is not going to be Deputy Prime Minister. That's clear. That's David Lammy. And I think this position, outside of the constraints of collective agreement, outside the constraints of running a department and all of that, means that I can be 100% full-time political and deputy leader. I can operate outside of the constraints of government, but I can operate very effectively politically at the heart of that. I really want to use that in part as well to be that bridge, absolutely, with our communities through our members and our elected representatives, but also to build up some capacity in the Labour Party. When we're in government, we always let the party sort of wither on the vine. And then we wonder when it comes to an election or when it comes to being in opposition, like what's happened to our sort of capacity to rebuild the political strategy work, to rebuild the comms work, to rebuild that sort of campaigning machine in service of not kind of separate to, but working alongside the government, but actually being run by the party and not just as a little adjunct of number 10, because I just don't think that's as effective as it can be.
Obviously, the public has been really aware of all the movement within the Labour Party lately. Change, in which you lost your job, Angela Rayner's departure, of course, as well. So there's a lot of change going on. What do you think that kind of tells us about the state of the party as we're sort of starting conference here? And why do you think Labour got to a position where there is such kind of ruction?
Well, look, I think we need a cultural reset. I've been really clear about that. I think we need a cultural reset about how we approaching some of these things, and the kind of groupthink at the heart of some of this, you know, is why we've made some of the mistakes that we've made. Is why we've lost touch as much as we as we need to be in touch with not just our movement and the members, but what our movement represents and its real strength. So, I think I will help to reset some of that culture, to make sure that we are listening, we are responding, we are acting, and we are more authentic to ourselves, and we're telling that sort of stronger story, representing the strength of our broad movement.
And IPPR this week published a report on insurgent government, urging Labour kind of take a populist approach, take the fight to landlords and digital retail giants whose business models are gutting the high street. There's this trend of left-wing populism. Do you think populism is sort of the answer, or a left populism the answer to Labour's malaise, or this kind of problem, like this kind of story gap, or should Labour reject populism?
Well, we definitely need to be the insurgents. You know, we're impatient to change, to rewire the country, to act in service of the many and not the few. And there are some examples, I think, about how we can perhaps more strongly show that. And I think one of the things we struggled with is that politics is moving incredibly fast, like faster than I can ever remember in my life, over the last few years. What huge swings we keep having, public opinion, things that keep having big change that happens. There's huge global changes as well that are very challenging for any country to deal with. So politics is very fast and government is very slow. And I can be the bridge between that, actually. But also I think we've got to recognise that and not be so governmental about some things, but remember that sort of we're the politicians in the room. Like, it's our job to show people that we're on their side. It's our job as politicians to make sure what we're doing is popular and what people want us to be doing. That's what makes us politicians and not just civil servants.
So that is kind of the dilemma that Labour faces. Labour, if Labour wants to be a bit more insurgent and shake things up, but it's the government. So it's not there to be a disruptor. It's there to get things done and to show to the electorate, look, we're making progress. We've told you we were going to do X and Y, Z, and we've done it. So can Labour really do both of those things at once?
Well, you need to do both of those things, I think, at once. I think it gets back to what we were talking about earlier about having a much clearer sense of the diagnosis of the problem and how everything we do is working in service of that and joining that up better, so that people recognise. Sometimes we're shy about some of the workers' rights, but I think we've been very shy about that. For example, incredibly popular because people want, job insecurity is a massive thing today in a way that it didn't used to be. And we should be really clear about why we've done that and how it's going to sort of change people's lives. And so I think you do have to be both. You have to show the change. People have to feel the change, but they have to understand the change, where it's coming from and why you're doing it. And we're not necessarily doing that. That's well.
So if the ultimate problem isn't immigration, in the way that Reform says it is, what is it for you? What if Labour to say this is the one thing we're going to really go after?
Look, I'm not saying that immigration is not a problem. Immigration is a problem. Illegal immigration, and a sense that we haven't got control of our borders, how those asylum seekers and others have been dealt with, housed in so-called hotels. I mean, what a terrible bit of comms that is, the idea that someone's staying in kind of luxury in a hotel or put in HMOs in communities just have got no capacity to deal with that, and there's no support, there's no services, this huge backlog. I mean, it's a massive problem. Like, I'm not getting away from that being a real problem at all. But it's not the main reason why people are struggling to get by, can't get a decent job, having to have two jobs to just pay the basics, have got less and less joy in their lives, less dignity, less stability, and especially in different parts of the country where that's even more the case. And so we've got deep inequality, which the trickle-down economics has exacerbated in regions, in class, in education, in people, in job security, in wealth, in asset wealth. And we've got to fix that. We've got to rewire the country in a different way. And I think we've just got to show that everything we're doing is about addressing that.
So what's the insurgent way that Labour could address inequality?
Well, there's lots of insurgent ways, I think, but I think it starts with a clearer sense of whose side we're on. It starts with a clearer sense of that diagnosis, and it starts with drawing together all the things that we are already doing and will continue to do, in service of that, and going out in a kind of clearer way and selling that a bit.
Do you think? You were very clear.
Let's give me hard questions.
Sorry. You were really clear just now that, there are problems with immigration. You're not saying that everything's fine with immigration. So you're not trying to kind of downplay
Definitely
the
not.
problems there. But do you think, you've also talked about how the government, you laid out that op-ed in The Guardian, for example, how you would take the fight to reform. You'd say different things about the problems with the country. If it seems like the way it looks, I think, to a lot of voters is that the government, Starmer government, has sort of accepted the reform argument and kind of gone in that direction. Do you think that's true? And should the government be kind of not just offering kind of a vision for how we do things better, but also actually taking that argument apart a bit more?
We do need to take, I think it's a few different things, isn't it? I think we definitely, handed over the political megaphone. Everyone kind of felt that, especially over the summer, didn't they? That setting the terms of the debate was in the hands of Nigel Farage, and I can assure you that as deputy leader, I would be wrestling back that megaphone, every week of the summer and other times. We've got to do that. So we've got to wrest that back. But we are the government. We're not just the Labour Party, and we have a long history of facing up to hatred, of division and these kind of divisive politics. That's in our DNA, and we've got to face that more strongly. That's what we've always done. But we're also in government, so we should be able to sort of control the agenda and the debate more than we currently are doing. And as I say, I think sort of tactical kind of trying to out reform or tipping one way, tipping the other. That's just not gonna work. We need to reunite our voter coalition and the country around that progressive voice of change and of hope. That's when we're always at our best, and that means calling it out when it's wrong, much more strongly. But it also means talking about what we're actually doing, and how we're going to fix it. You know, if I had £1 for every, not just party member, but member of the public, it was like, can you just stop going on about Farage and could you just tell us what you're doing? Then I'd be quite rich.
There's another plan if you don't win the
Yeah. I've got a few pounds that could be rich about. Yeah, you've not asked me about Andy Burnham yet. I'd be very rich if I got a crown for that every time someone asks me about Andy Burnham.
We'll say it.
Yeah.
In that same Guardian op-ed,
yeah,
which, as you say, maybe Keir Starmer read, we think potentially, if his language has changed a bit. Anyway,
he definitely used a paragraph on it this morning, so I'm going to take the credit.
Lovely feeling.
I'm going to take the credit.
You also wrote about Labour having abandoned progressive voters, which speaks a bit to what you just mentioned.
Yeah,
people kind of saying, what about us? So if Labour abandoned progressive voters, has that been a process? Or was there a moment when you felt like, okay, or your voters are telling you stepped away from us?
I think it's a risk that we're abandoning. Voter. We're not. And that I think that's sort of showing in the polls, isn't it? And kind of what's happening. And look, my constituency in Manchester Central is actually half red wall and half urban. I think people always think my constituency is quite city centre. That's only about a third or so of my constituency currently, although it's growing very fast. The other half of my constituency, Failsworth, Newton Heath, these are traditional white working class communities where, every single lamppost has got a flag on it at the moment, traditional values, all of that, all those kind of issues. So I recognise what it takes to rebuild that voter coalition. I've also got a very diverse part of my constituency as well. And I think I represent actually what is Labour's most successful sort of voter coalition. I did this big piece of work after the 2019 elections with Labour Together about why the red wall had collapsed, why we did so badly in 2019. A big, I thought, quite seminal report at the time in 2020, and a lot of that work is as true today as it was then. And one of the things we did actually, which I sat through for 2 days, we brought together voters from sort of traditional kind of red wall towns across the north and some more metropolitan left-leaning voters. We had them for the day one. They were in separate rooms and they had to draw up their perfect manifesto for a party. And they both drew up these quite different manifestos. And then for the second day, we said, right, there's been an election now and you've got to form a coalition. So they had to take their two manifestos and work out which bits they had in common. And that's what we based a lot of that Labour Together report on. And it was things like wanting lower rents, wanting more security at work, wanting a job that helped pay, having one job helped pay the bills, having some hope for the future, dignity. It was those kind of issues. So, for example, looking at right to buy because they felt that wasn't working anymore. That was united all of those voters. So whether you're living in the city centre and you can't afford to pay the rent, or you're living in Failsworth in my constituency and you're a pensioner couple and you feel like the country's going in the wrong direction, there are these things that unite our voter coalition about how we can rewire the country that I think we can be right at the forefront of. Sorry, that was a very long answer to your question.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You wrote in the Mirror recently that Labour needs to give a greater sense of who we're fighting for, and you said that included being clear that the objective is to lift children out of poverty.
Yeah, absolutely.
And getting rid of the 2-child benefit limit is important in order to do that. Last year's conference, there were people talking about that, and we're kind of wanting it to happen. Obviously, we're a year later now, and it still hasn't happened. Why do you think it's taken so long for that shift to happen with such an unpopular policy?
Yeah, and I think this is where we do need to be a lot clearer about what our guiding principles are and what our objectives are. And sometimes our body language doesn't always give that off. Lifting the 2-child benefit cap is a no-brainer in terms of addressing child poverty. And that's what Labour governments do. We fundamentally deal with child poverty. Even in my constituency, which is got the booming city centre, I've still got one. I think I'm in the top 5 levels of child poverty in the country. I know what happens when children are going to school hungry, wearing £1 wellies from Matalan as their school shoes because they're the only school shoes they can afford. I know what impact that has on their life chances and their education. And a policy that can lift 500,000 children out of poverty in an instant we should be really, really clear as a Labour government that is something we want to do and we're working to. And now there is an even greater urgency about that because since the year that we've been in government, there's been another 40,000 children brought into poverty because of that policy. Even in the last year, another year it will be another 40,000. So it's not something we can wait. So I think we've got to be a lot clearer about prioritising that, a lot clearer that this is an objective that we are working towards. And sometimes we find ourselves in these defensive crouches about things and giving off the opposite vibe, even though I know it is our objective to lift the 2-child cap. I've heard Keir talk about that many times over recent months. He wants to do that, but I don't think we've really projected that as strongly as we could. So that's why. But I think now as well there's just a much greater urgency about it. If we want to have the impact on not just child poverty, but life chances that are transformed by that, then we can't wait much longer.
Coming back to the deputy leadership competition, it's you and it's Bridget Phillipson. It's 2 women.
Yeah.
But Labour's still not had a woman leader, although obviously other parties have, including the Conservatives. Yeah. How do you explain that absence of a woman in the top job in Labour's history?
How do I explain it? Well, look, I think what's really good that was only ever women in contention for this job right now. It was only women who put themselves forward for it. I think it was really clear that everyone wanted it to be a woman in this job right now. So we had 6 women in total who sort of put themselves forward, a shortlist now of 2. And that's great. And we do need more women at the top of the Labour Party. I hope that in the next time there's a vacancy, we can really make sure we look at a woman leader as well.
Why do you think it hasn't? What's
I don't know. Why do you think?
I don't know. I'm asking you.
I know.
You know Labour better than me. Is it about the cultural issue? It's culture that you were talking about, the lack of a kind of.
There's probably a whole load of things in there. I think really, as women, we do question ourselves a bit more. It is tough. I mean, look at what's happened to Angela as deputy leader, deputy prime minister. The criticism that she's had, the real scrutiny that she's under about the way she looks, what she sounds like, where she's from, her background, and that was something I really thought about in the short time that I had to actually think about this, and it'll probably come. Yeah, there's probably a team of Telegraph journalists on me already. And that kind of level of scrutiny that you're putting your family under, your friends, your life, it's a big thing to ask, isn't it? And I think as women, maybe as women on the left more, that we're more questioning of that and we're more unsure about that. So whether women are more prepared to really go for it these days, I think is a difficult, and obviously a huge amount of abuse you get on social media, being in the public eye, being a politician as a woman, especially, and even more so for women of ethnic minority backgrounds, is not a pleasant place, is it?
Do you think the party does enough to support women when they face those challenges?
No, I don't actually, and that's something I want to help with as well. Not just for women, but for all colleagues. Politics has become incredibly personalised as well, and we use that to our advantage when we want to. So in the election, we made a huge amount of individual candidates and individual seats, on YouTube, on Facebook, about who they were, this person, that, blah, blah. And then we kind of then treat people as not as individuals when they come to Parliament. We just kind of expect them to kind of toe the line or do as they're told. There's been, Sharon Hodgson just had an arson attack on her constituency office. There were things like that happening, for lots of death threats and all sorts of things. And I think there's a lot more we can do to challenge some of the dis and misinformation, some of the abuse, and some of the atmosphere and context that are, a real challenge for colleagues. And I've been on the end of it myself, a number of times as well. And it is absolutely awful, and it takes a resilience and a robustness that is a lot to ask.
You've been an MP since 2012. Have you felt it get worse?
Oh, way worse in that time. Way worse in that time. Significantly. I mean, when I was first an MP in 2012, it was hardly really Twitter and Facebook as a sort of medium for political campaigning, hardly at all really at that time. And now that is the kind of, they're some of the main mediums, aren't they, of social media in general, of sort of political communicating and political debate, and what that's generated in terms of abuse, hate, division, conspiracy theories, kind of spreading of misrepresentations, misinformation, is really quite a hard thing to push back on, to be honest. And I think, our democracy as a result is in quite a fragile place, which is what we're seeing, in the fragmentation and the division in politics as well. And again, I think that's why, as Labour Party, we've got to stand up to that and rebuild and that trust and reunite people against that, because what would come afterwards if we got that wrong, I really would worry to think about.
So this is the first day of conference.
I know some people are already. Some people are already completely knackered already. I'm okay, but
before we wrap up, which we'll have in a second, what do you think would be a mark of a successful Labour conference this week? Do you want to see some confrontation and discussion and like rigorous debate, or do you want a happy community altogether? What would be the good?
Oh, well, it's probably somewhere in between. Well, look, I think I want to see us come out fighting strongly to the public. Like, these moments as a party conference are a real chance for us on a political basis, like free from sort of a government basis or a parliament basis, to really show ourselves, explain to people why we're doing things, what we're doing them for, and who we're doing them for, and kind of take this moment to really seize the political megaphone, as I describe it. This is our week to do that, so let's use that successfully and wisely, and part of that is about not having kind of divisions sort of on show all the time, but that's not the same as having a healthy debate between ourselves. We're all members of the Labour Party, we're all adults, we can have a debate about, can we do better, how can we improve, what does that look like, without that all spilling out into some kind of throwing bricks episode.
Let's hope there'll be no bricks thrown. No, certainly not here. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be watching the Deputy Leadership Race.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
This interview was from an episode of the Prospect podcast. To listen to the episode in full, including further discussion and our weekly banger and dud section, click the link in the description below. And to read more of Prospect's award-winning journalism, head to prospectmagazine.co.uk.